If I can get everybody in, I'm sorry to push, but we need to finish on time. So if everyone can be seated, I would be grateful. And I would kindly ask Mr. Aristos Constantine to come and introduce Mr. Lakkotrypis, the Minister of Energy. Aristos, here you are. Good. Thank you.
Good morning, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, friends. Thank you all for being here. And we'll give a couple of seconds for everybody to get situated. I think what is readily apparent is that Cyprus proves out the old adage that what does not kill you serves to make you stronger. The transition that we've undergone over the last few years has resulted in our economy today being more robust, more diversified, and more competitive than ever before. And now in a period of transition in a post-Brexit Europe, as well as changes here in the US and around the world, Cyprus is positioned to be a unifying force for cooperation and stability in our important region of the East Med, as well as beyond. Our ever-strengthening bilateral and trilateral cooperations cover a myriad of strategic areas of cooperation, but perhaps the most catalytic and impactful of those is the energy sector. And the man who has been at the forefront of those developments over the last few years is our next speaker, His Excellency, Minister of Energy, Commerce, Industry and Tourism of the Republic of Cyprus, Mr. Yiorgos Lakkotrypis. Please join me in welcoming him to the podium.
Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. Let me also start by thanking the organizers for this fantastic opportunity to be presenting for a few minutes what we are doing in the oil and gas industry, a newly founded industry in Cyprus, and what the vision is, what the strategy is to help Cyprus become an energy hub, an energy center in the Eastern Mediterranean. First of all, let me say that very simple strategy here. How do we create a knowledge-based hydrocarbons industry that will provide top quality services worldwide? And there is a very deep thought behind this vision. It doesn't talk about monetizing the gas or the liquids. It doesn't talk about creating industries. It doesn't talk about all these things that will eventually happen short to midterm. We will see the monetization of the gas. We are already seeing a lot of services being rendered out of Cyprus. This vision talks about the number one advantage that Cyprus has, which is its human talent. So the vision here is that once we extract the gas, once the gas is sold, once it's gone, what we are left with is with the best knowledge in the industry that would help us. All of those services that today we have to import from outside, legal, financial, accounting, commercial, technical, that we are able to export them ourselves. So that's the long-term vision that the oil and gas industry is helping us pursue. Now, we are trying to achieve this vision based on four pillars. I'm going to go very briefly through each one of them. Geopolitical alignment is the first one. The exploration program is the second. Exploitation options is the third. And of course, a fourth, what I call the fourth dimension, which is needed if we are to put Cyprus on the map as an energy hub or an energy center. So geopolitical alignment and a pillar which, under other circumstances in many different other parts of the world, the North Sea, for example, where political sensitivities don't exist and things are much easier, it might not be necessary. In the case of Cyprus, this is fundamental because we sit in a region which is pretty volatile with regards to politics, geopolitical developments. So what we as a country are trying to do is make sure that first we have excellent relationships with our neighbors. As you can see, we have signed these agreements, delineation agreements with Egypt, with Lebanon, with Israel. We have unitization agreements with Egypt and under negotiations with the Republic of Lebanon and Israel. We are, only last week we signed an intergovernmental agreement for a subsea pipeline between Cyprus and Egypt. All of these elements, plus the tripartite or quadripartite meetings that we have, aligning with the United States, aligning with the European Union, aligning with many different parts of the world which are influencing what's happening in a region, is important for us, not only to provide political certainty, but to a very big degree to provide economic certainty as well for all the multi-billion projects that are needed to develop this industry. Let's take, for example, the intergovernmental agreement. We've had the companies, you'll hear from some of them in just a minute, telling us, look, this is a project of 30, 40 years, this is the lifetime of the project. We don't want that project to be dependent on the relationships of President Anastasiadis and President Sisi, or Minister Lakkotrypis and Minister El Molla. We want some framework, an intergovernmental agreement that would dictate the relationship of the two countries for the longer term. And this is exactly what we have done, because we can have the conversation with our neighbors. So geopolitical alignment, very important first pillar. Now, we will not be talking about an oil and gas industry without the resources, right? So what you see on the left-hand side of the screen is the United States Geological Survey forecast in 2010, forecasting that the Eastern Mediterranean holds approximately 200 trillion cubic feet of gas and 1.7 billion barrels of oil. And what you can see on the right-hand side of the screen, it's actually this forecast coming true. Not only with the discoveries in Israel, giant fields of Leviathan, of Tamar, not only the recent discovery of Zohr, which has basically illuminated the Eratosthenes subsea mountain, which sits entirely into, almost entirely into the Cyprus exclusive economic zone. We have also seen recently the Onisiforos discovery, technical discovery, I'll talk about that in just a second. And we have seen also just 6-7 months ago the significant discovery of Calypso in Block 6. So what we are seeing, the second pillar of the strategy is, of course, exploration, exploration, exploration. So what do we have now? We have so far 3 discoveries, 2 commercial, 1 technical. Right? The Aphrodite field was discovered back in 2011 by Noble and Delek. And of course now the consortium comprises also of Shell. Then we have the Onisiforos West, which was drilled by Total. That was a technical discovery. A technical discovery means we found gas, but not commercial quantities. Yeah. And then, of course, a few months later, we have the Calypso discovery, which was by Eni and Total, which was called significant. We're still evaluating the size of the resource, but I can assure you it is significant. And what these last 2 discoveries tell us, even Onisiforos, which cannot be commercialized at this point in time, is proving the presence of gas in Cyprus exclusive economic zone near Eratosthenes. It's important, very important, especially for the wells that will be drilled very soon, and I'm sure you'll be hearing about that from Exxon in a minute. That will be drilled very soon by Exxon, and of course, the next wave of the exploration program by Eni and Total. So exploration is important, adding up the resources that would open up the possibilities of the country with regards to its exploitation options. Which leads me, of course, to the exploitation options of the country. What is the Eastern Mediterranean now? And we are seeing in recent years the depletion of resources, of the European resources of natural gas and liquids. And what we are seeing is the Eastern Mediterranean becoming an alternative source to the European Union and an alternative route, which is very important. So you don't want to limit your dependencies on the supplies, but you create dependencies on further routing. So an alternative source, what we have been trying all these years and part of our core strategy is to create what we call the Eastern Mediterranean corridor to the European markets. And that corridor can have many different shapes and forms, right? We have looked and we are looking at the different exploitation options that we have. Let's take, for example, the Aphrodite field. We've came to the conclusion that the most optimal way to monetize that resource is to ship it by pipeline to Egypt, liquefy the gas into some of the LNG terminals which are today in Itku, and you can see it at the bottom left of the screen. And from there on, after it's liquefied, it's shipped to Europe, which, by the way, and as many of you might be aware, it has an LNG strategy, either receiving gas from the Eastern Med or receiving gas from the US LNG, which is also on the rise. Another option that we monetize, of course, is constructing an LNG terminal in Cyprus. Right? It all depends on what kind of quantities will be discovered. There are some minimum economic requirements to make that project bankable. We have options for floating LNG. You may also have heard about the EastMed pipeline. It's a project which has received interest from the European Union. It's receiving funding for the studies, right, to tell us whether a pipeline from the fields in the Eastern Med all the way to Greece and from there to continental Europe makes economic sense. Will it be competitive? We know it can be done, right? But is it economic? Is it competitive? That's questions. Of course, there's the options of petrochemicals industries, right? And this is why the second pillar of the strategy exploration is important, to determine which of these options, one or more, will be implementable. Last but not least, the fourth pillar, which I talked about, is all those things which are needed and actually cannot be categorized in one single vertical, all those things which are needed to make the country an energy hub. All those things which are needed for the country to maximize the potential that it has sitting in the center of the Northeast Mediterranean. For example, port facilities. We are now in the process, what you're seeing here, and this was sent to me by my colleague, the Minister of Transport. We're in the process now for creating a new port, energy port at Vasilikos that will service the industry. Already we are seeing a lot of servicing of other countries' operations from Cyprus. We want to do more of that. Another thing which we are doing, how do we attract, retain, and develop talent? How do we do this, right? Fundamental when you start a new industry such as this, and the first thing that we needed to acknowledge as a country is that we have no idea. So we needed to attract, we still do, we have a very intensive training program. We have agreements with the companies which they pay us an annual fee that goes into training programs or internships, and we're expanding that. Now, and another thing which we're doing in this respect, how do we improve the legal regulatory framework, right? As we go along into the various steps of the oil and gas value chain, how do we make sure that we have the best legal regulatory framework that would host the big investments, the multinationals which are required in order to proceed with the project? And I can mention many examples that we are looking into continuously. It's a continuous iteration of improving our legal and regulatory framework. With that, that will conclude my presentation, Stavros. I look forward to the discussion you'll be hearing from some great companies in just a minute, and I think it's more important that you hear from them than you hear from somebody who is totally biased, okay, on the Cyprus oil and gas markets. So with that, thank you very much for your attention, and I look forward to good conversation in a minute. Thank you.